وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ولا شبيه ولا مثيل له ولا ضد ولا ند ولا جسد ولا صورة ولا أعضاء له. كان الله ولا مكان، فهو الآن على ما عليه كان. فلا تضربوا لله الأمثال ولله المثل الأعلى. تنزه ربي عن الجلوس والقعود وعن الحركة والسكون وعن الاتصال والانفصال. لا يحل فيه شيء ولا يحل منه شيء ولا يحل هو فيه شيء، لأنه ليس كمثله شيء. مهما تصورت بذلك فالله لا يشبه ذلك. ومن وصف الله بمعنى من معاني البشر فقد كفر. وأشهد أن سيدنا وعظيمنا وقائدنا وقرة أعيننا محمدا عبد الله ورسوله ونبيه وصفيه وحبيبه وخليله، أرسله الله هدى ورحمة للعالمين، هاديا ومبشرا ونذيرا وداعيا إلى الله بإذنه سراجا وهاجا وقمرا منيرا. اللهم صل وسلم وأعظم وأنعم وأكرم على هذا النبي الكريم سيدنا محمد خاتم النبيين. كلما ذكره الذاكرون وغفل عن ذكره الغافلون. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا حبيب الله. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا عظيم الجاه. أما بعد، فنذكر أنفسنا بإخلاص النية لله تعالى في حضور هذا المجلس، مجلس علم الدين، المجلس الذي وصفه الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم بأنه روضة من رياض الجنة، والمجلس الذي تحفه الملائكة فتنزل فيه الرحمات والبركات والأسرار، والمجلس الذي ينال المسلم المخلص فيه ثوابا عظيما. فإن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: يا أبا ذر، لأن تغدو فتتعلم بابا من العلم خير لك من أن تصلي 1000 ركعة، أي من النوافل التامات. فهنيئا لمن وفقه الله تعالى لهذا العمل العظيم. I praise Allah, I glorify Him and I thank Him for all the blessings that He gives without me being obligated to give anything. And I ask Allah Ta'ala to raise the rank of our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and to protect the Muslim nation. I testify that no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah, the one without a partner, the one without an equal, the one without a similar, the one who is unlike anything in the universe, and nothing in the universe is like Him. He has no father, no mother, no sister, no brother, no son, and no daughter. He exists without time and place because He is the creator of time and place. He does not reside above the throne, and He is not attributed with fatigue, like the Jews say. Our Lord is glorified beyond any imperfection that the non-Muslims attribute to Him. Whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah Ta'ala does not resemble that. And whoever attributes an attribute of the creations to Allah is outside of Islam. And I testify that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the son of Abdullah, the son of Abdul Muttalib, the son of Hashim, the son of Abdul Manaf, from the tribe of Quraysh, is the best creation of Allah and His final prophet and messenger, sent to all humans and jinn, and He is truthful about everything that He conveyed in the revelation. Thereafter, we remind ourselves to have the sincere intention for the sake of Allah in attending this session of Islamic knowledge, because having the sincere intention is a requirement to get the reward. So the Muslim, whenever he does a good deed, he has to have the sincere intention for the sake of Allah to get a reward for that good deed. The reward is defined as the compensation that the Muslim receives in the hereafter for the good deeds that he did in this life among what makes him happy. An example of the reward that is guaranteed to the righteous Muslim in the grave, to the pious Muslim in the grave, is that his grave is expanded approximately 105 feet by 105 feet, and his grave is illuminated with a light similar to the light of the full moon, and the fragrance of paradise will be present in the grave. The sincere intention means for the Muslim to do the good deed, seeking the acceptance of Allah only, and not the praise of the people. So alhamdulillah, we are grateful to Allah that He has endowed upon us the greatest endowment, the endowment of Islam. Because the one who has Islam, it's as if he has everything. And the one who does not have an Islam, he has nothing. The one who has an Islam, he has everything, because if he makes it into the hereafter with that, and with al-Islam, if he makes it into the hereafter as a Muslim, then he will enter paradise eventually, and he will be in paradise forever and ever and ever. And he will experience bliss, and he will experience peace, and he will experience tranquility, and he will experience pleasure beyond anything that the human mind could measure in this world. And it never ends. So having that is greater than anything in this world. And not having that, and in the hereafter, instead of having that, having suffering or torture or pain, which is something that is incomparable to any suffering or pain in this world. In the hereafter, the pain and the torture is something that we cannot fathom right now, something that we cannot even wrap our minds around. In this life, we might feel some pain, a toothache, we might feel a stomach ache, we might feel a fever, we might feel a flu, and we feel like someone might say it's the end of the world. But so imagine the pain of the hereafter. Imagine the suffering of the hereafter. It is not comparable, or any pain in this world is not comparable to that pain. So the one in the hereafter who enters paradise, but let's say he suffered in this world, his suffering in this world is gone. And then once he is in paradise, he'll only be experiencing the enjoyment. So the only thing that's present for him is the enjoyment. And whatever suffering or difficulty that occurred is in the past and it's gone and it passed. It's not there anymore. And the opposite is true for the non-Muslim. Meaning that non-Muslim in this life, if he experienced pleasure and luxury, but he went into the hereafter as an accountable non-Muslim, he's only going to experience pain and suffering and torture. And all the pleasure that he felt, and all the enjoyment that he felt while he was alive in this world is gone. It's not there anymore, it passed. So we are grateful to Allah Ta'ala for this great endowment. The endowment that without it, this life would be empty. This life would be depressing. And for many of the non-Muslims it is. And we are also grateful to Allah Ta'ala that He has given us access to the authentic teachings of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah with the connected chains. Because that's not something that everyone has nowadays. And having the authentic chains, it gives the Muslim the clarity that he needs to make sure that he is getting closer to his objective. Because what's our objective in this world? To work for the hereafter. That is what the Quran advises us with, and that is what the great companions have said. اليوم العمل وغدا الحساب. Today is, or right now is the time of doing the deeds, and in the hereafter is the time of reaping the reward. And that means that the majority of the reward, or the majority of the results of our deeds that we see, is going to be in the hereafter. But it's still possible that we see the results of our good deeds now, but it's going to be minimal compared to the hereafter. So alhamdulillah, this is the greatest endowment. So the one who neglects to learn, the one who neglects to have the proper foundation, it will be a reason of regret in the future. And possibly, it'll be something that the person will not come back from. So if they didn't put the effort to learn in the beginning, and then afterwards, let's say, they wanted to change or they wanted to do what's right, but they've gone so far that their self, their nafs doesn't help them, and they are just overwhelmed and they are too stuck in their habits and they can't bring themselves back. It is much easier to put the effort in the beginning and to remain consistent throughout your life than to neglect learning and neglect doing the things that Allah ordered for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and then when you're 40 now, you want to pray, Now you want to fast. Now you want to avoid the haram. But you already spent 40 years in bad habits, 40 years not praying, 40 years being ignorant, 40 years neglecting your soul. So it's more difficult to break that cycle once the person has spent so much time neglecting themselves. SubhanAllah. Today we wanted to talk about two things, mercy and forgiveness. The Prophet ﷺ, he said about himself, إِنَّمَا أَنَا رَحْمَةٌ مُهْدَى, which means that the Prophet ﷺ, he was sent as a mercy, and he was sent as a guide. So what does this mean, mercy? The mercy of the prophets being sent is that it is not an obligation upon Allah to send the prophets. Allah Ta'ala أرسل الأنبياء رحمة منه وفضلا منه وليس لأنه كان واجبا عليه أن يرسل الأنبياء، مع أن الإنسان لا يصل إلى ما أوجبه الله تعالى وما حرمه من الشرع، لا يصل إليه بمجرد عقله والتفكر والتدبر والنظر في المخلوقات. لا يصل الإنسان إلى نتيجة أنه يعني بمجرد عقله أنه يجب عليه أن يصلي 5 صلوات في اليوم والليلة. بمجرد عقله لا يصل الإنسان إلى أنه يجب عليه أن يصوم شهر رمضان. بمجرد العقل لا يصل الإنسان إلى حكم أنه يحرم عليه الزنا أو يحرم عليه القتل وما شابه ذلك من الشرائع. فنحن محتاجون إلى الأنبياء حتى يبلغوا ما أوحى الله إليهم، حتى نعلم ما هو الصراط المستقيم والطريق الصحيح حتى نصل إلى الجنة. فالله تعالى لا يجب عليه، ليس واجبا عليه أن يرسل المرسلين، إنما إرسال المرسلين إلينا رحمة من الله. So this mercy, the prophets, they are a mercy. Why are they a mercy? Because Allah Ta'ala, He is not obligated to do anything. And if it were not for the prophets, then we would not be able to know what our obligations are. And if it wasn't for the prophets, we wouldn't be able to know what the prohibitions are. And if it wasn't for the prophets, we wouldn't be able to know what is the right way to live, what is the correct path, what is the straight path, what is the way to make it to paradise. Because the human being, he is unable to rely solely on his mind to reach to the conclusion of those matters. The human being, he can't just use his mind and get to the conclusion that he has to pray 5 times a day. The human being cannot use his mind and come to the conclusion that he has to fast the month of Ramadan. The human being cannot rely solely upon his mind to come to the conclusion that such and such thing is haram or such and such thing is permissible. So we are the ones who are in need of knowing that information so that we can implement it, so that we can do what's right. And Allah Ta'ala, He's not obligated to do anything. So Him sending the prophets to this earth is a mercy for us. So that way we would know what's the correct way to live. That way we would know what is the ideal way to live, what is the way that is accepted by the Creator of the universe. And so the concept of mercy is a theme in Islam that has a high virtue and it has a high status. And the Prophet ﷺ, he was the most merciful creation. The Prophet ﷺ was the most pardoning creation. Some examples of how great the mercy and compassion and pardoning of the Prophet ﷺ was, is that for 13 years, the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims, of course, they were harmed and abused by the non-Muslims, by the mushrikun. They would spit in the Prophet's face. They would throw things at him. They would throw feces on his door. They tried to harm him. They would insult him. They would make fun of him. They would belittle him. So fast forward to when the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims, about 100,000 deep, companions like Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and Ali, all together supporting the Prophet ﷺ. After the Muslims had become strong and they had dominated, and they came back to Mecca from Al-Madinah, because as you know, the Muslims were living in Mecca for 13 years. Then they were ordered to migrate to Al-Madinah, and they migrated following the order of Allah, and they were able to live their lives as Muslims without being persecuted. And then 10 years passed, and they came back to Mecca, and they conquered it. So the same people that had abused the Prophet ﷺ, that had harmed him and his companions and killed members of his family and tried to kill him. They tried to kill the Prophet ﷺ. Now he's back. Now he has the upper hand. Now he has the power, the dominance. And the people of Mecca, they surrendered to him. And so, if he wanted to get revenge, he would easily be able to get revenge. But instead, what did he do? Instead, what did the Prophet ﷺ do? He said, no harm will come to you. He had mercy. And so the people began to embrace Islam in waves and waves and waves. That's an example. Now think of yourself. What would you do if you were harmed and abused and hurt and done injustice to, and then the tables turned and you now are in a position where you can enact your revenge? How would you do? What would you react? So we think about that, and we think about how close we are to the virtue, or how far we are. So this mercy, right, in general is good. Mercy with the creations. With any creation. You can have mercy with any creation. But most specifically, or that mercy, it behooves the Muslim to have that mercy with the Muslim. Because the Muslim, he has such a high status to Allah just for being Muslim. حُرْمَةُ الْمُؤْمِنِ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَعْظَمُ مِنْ حُرْمَةِ الْكَعْبَةِ. So the Muslim, the sanctity of the Muslim to Allah is greater than the sanctity of the Kaaba. Allahu Akbar. That means with the Muslim, you're extra careful, extra delicate. And what did our sheikhs used to say? They would say, treat the Muslim like a glass doll. Like a doll made out of glass. What are you going to do with the doll made out of glass? Are you going to be rough with it? No, because it's going to break. It's going to shatter, it's going to crack, it's going to chip. So you're gentle with it, you're delicate with it, you're careful with it. That's how we're supposed to be with the Muslim. Now if you want to be hard and you want to be rough and aggressive, do that with the kuffar. And it's not the ideal, because still as a Muslim, the mercy and the compassion and the politeness and the softness, it goes a long way also with the kuffar. It has an impact on them that can change them to the positive. It can entice them and bring them close to Islam. But if you're going to be rough and aggressive and if you're not going to be merciful and you're not going to be soft and you're not going to be careful, do that with the non-Muslim. Don't do it with the Muslim. Don't do it with the Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ, it is narrated from him that he said, "Man la yarham la yurham." The one who doesn't have mercy will not get mercy. Allahu Akbar. And another hadith, which is a very famous hadith, الراحمون يرحمهم الرحمن ارحموا من في الأرض يرحمكم من في السماء. Which means the merciful ones, Allah Ta'ala has mercy upon them. Have mercy upon the inhabitants of the earth, and the inhabitants of the heavens will have mercy upon you. And the inhabitants of the heavens are the angels, right? Because the heavens is a place and it has a beginning, and so obviously Allah Ta'ala is not attributed with being in a place, because Allah Ta'ala is the only one that has no beginning. So who among us would not want to get mercy from the angels? Who among us thinks about themselves? Who thinks of themselves that they're so strong, or that they're so perfect, or that they don't spill a cup of milk, or that they don't make a mess, or that they don't mishear something, or that they don't, let's say, put something in the wrong place, etc., or burn the food, or whatever it is that happens as human beings. It hasn't happened to you? Or are you, someone might say, the perfect one? Highly, for sure that's not the case. For sure that's not the case. So try to implement the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ, that he did not scold. The Prophet ﷺ, he did not scold. What is scolding? Who knows the meaning of the word scolding? Anyone? You know it? MashaAllah, we got the youngsters here. Can you tell us?
Scolding is when you yell at someone. Yeah.
Okay. That's on the right track, when you yell at someone. Who can give us an example of scolding?
I never even heard that word for a while.
Well, now you're learning a new word.
Like, you scold the dog because he spilled some food on the ground.
So okay, that's a good example. So here's an example of scolding. Why did you do that? Why are you doing this? Don't do that. For example. Why did you put that here? Why did you put that there? That's scolding. How could you forget this? How could you forget that? That's scolding. Did the Prophet ﷺ ever do that? No. What did the servant of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say? Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu anhu. What did he say? He said, I served the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for 10 years, and he never asked me, why did I do something? He never asked me, why did I do that? Allahu Akbar. And he is the servant, he is serving the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So usually in that dynamic of authority, the authority dynamic versus the subservient, the one who's under the authority. Usually the authority figure, it's understood or common practice that they would say, how come you didn't come in at scheduled time? Or like I say, like a teacher, why didn't you do your homework? For example, someone that is like a manager, why didn't you do this, why didn't you do that? Or this task wasn't completed, what happened here, what happened there? That's expected. That's expected in that dynamic. But what about when it's just us in a community? What is the reason for somebody coming to another person and saying, why did you do this, why did you do that, how could you do this, how could you do that, don't do this, don't do that? Like they're your boss or your manager or your mother. And even sometimes in that dynamic of authority versus subservience, and the one who's under the authority acts like the one who's in the authority. Like what's an example? We're going to give 2 examples. Like the child with the parent and like the wife with the husband. Sometimes the child with the parent, the child says to the parent, why did you put this on the bread? Or why did you make the food like this? Or why did you do that? SubhanAllah. This is not correct. So all the children out there, never talk to your parents like that. This is a dispraise attribute. And of course, for the wives, definitely should never talk to the husband like that. And that's just something that the scholars, they have said explicitly. To put it in a short, very brief, summarized way, you address your husband like you address a king. Not like you're addressing your son. Not like you're addressing the servant or, let's say, an employee. Like a king. How do you talk to a king? With a calm voice, with a calm demeanor. You say, what do you think if we do this? Or how about if we do that? Suggesting. Not barking orders. SubhanAllah. Not barking orders. Have mercy on yourselves. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, ما نقصت صدقة من مال وما زاد الله عبدا بعفو إلا عزا وما تواضع أحد لله إلا رفعه الله. رواه Muslim. Allahu Akbar. This hadith contains many meanings. The first part says, wealth is not decreased by donating. Allahu Akbar. That means when it's time to donate, you shouldn't think about, I'm not going to have, let's say, instead of having $100,000 in savings, I'm only going to have, let's say, $90,000. The person shouldn't think that way. I'm going to have less than 6 figures savings. SubhanAllah, you shouldn't think like that. I won't be able to go on a 2-week vacation later this year. The person shouldn't think like that. He should donate without thinking about, I'm not going to be able to afford this, I'm not going to be able to afford that. Because more than likely, those things that the person is worried about not affording is beyond what they need. Is beyond what they need. The second part, وَمَا زَادَ اللَّهُ عَبْدًا بِعَفْوٍ إِلَّا عِزًّا. The pardoning. The pardoning. So mercy and pardoning. Mercy, yani, be kind to the person. And if, let's say, this Muslim was, not doing the ideal, or not talking about a sin. Because for a sin, you take a different process. But that Muslim, for example, doing something that, rubs you the wrong way, annoys you, or that you don't like it, or let's say they didn't follow exactly what you wanted, still have mercy on them. Be nice to them. Be soft-spoken to them. Don't scold them, don't bark at them. The pardoning is if someone does something to you, you don't hold a grudge. You don't hold a grudge. Because guess what? Holding the grudge is going to affect you more than it's going to affect the person that you're holding a grudge against. Because it's going to be eating you inside and eating you inside and eating you inside. And that person is going to continue living their life. They're not even going to think about anything that they've done to you. They're not even going to think about the effect that they had on you. They're oblivious to it. And then while you're sitting there, holding the grudge and holding the grudge and holding the grudge, that will get you nowhere. The Prophet ﷺ, he went out to a place, when I recall this, Al-Qanif, to call the people to Islam. And the people of that area, what did they do? They sent out the ruffians and their hooligans and their ill-mannered people to meet the Prophet ﷺ. And so that they could, treat him badly and throw stuff at him, etc. So they were insulting him, throwing stuff at him, and something hit the Prophet's face, and it broke one of his canines. Allahu Akbar. So imagine, right? Imagine if someone threw something at your face and broke one of your teeth. How would you feel? Enraged. Enraged. You want to kill them, you want to destroy them. So the Prophet ﷺ took cover, and that place was in between two mountains. There was a valley, and the angel of the two mountains came at that moment and asked and told the Prophet ﷺ. He let him know who he is, and he said, you just say the word. If you want, I'll make these two mountains fall upon them and destroy them all. Allahu Akbar. How many of us would make that choice? To people that they broke one of your teeth, that they hate you and that they want to show their hatred towards you. But what did the Prophet ﷺ choose? He chose to pardon. And he let it go. He didn't get revenge. And he made dua for those people. Allahu Akbar. So, وَمَا زَادَ اللَّهُ عَبْدًا بِعَفْوٍ إِلَّا عِزًّا. It means Allah Ta'ala does not increase the slave by pardoning except greatness. Al-Izz is one of those Arabic terms that there isn't a singular English word that encompasses the meaning and the feel and the texture of that word, the Izz. But it's a mixture of majesty and greatness and glory. Majesty, greatness, glory. All wrapped up together in one. That's Al-Izz. So the one who pardons, he only gets increased in this, in majesty and greatness and glory. And to that extent, it is important for the Muslim to be pardoning. And especially to the Muslim. Especially to the Muslim, because the Muslim, they have the bond of Islam, which is the greatest bond, is the strongest bond. And the last part, وَمَا تَوَاضَعَ أَحَدٌ لِلَّهِ إِلَّا رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ, is that no one humbles themselves for the sake of Allah, except that Allah Ta'ala elevates them. So do not take the path of arrogance, do not take the path of pride. Don't think, oh, this person did this to me, I'm going to do this to them. Oh, this person, they inconvenienced me in this way, I'm going to inconvenience them in that way. No tit for tat. That's not the way, that's not the ideal. Especially with the Muslim. Like I said, if you want to be rough and tough and aggressive, and you want to go hard on the kuffar. Scold the kuffar, yell at them, do that with the kuffar. But you find, subhanAllah, that some of these Muslims who are rough and tough with the Muslims, when they're in front of the kuffar, they're like nice little kittens. So meek. Yes, boss. Yes, sir. No problem, boss. Na'udhu billah. But for the Muslim, it's hey, and acting rough and tough. That's backwards. That's backwards. It is from the corruption of the heart and from the hardening of the heart. It's from the hardening of the heart. For the Muslim, be like the sugar in the tea. For the Muslim, be like the sugar in the tea. For the Kafir, if you want, be like the iron. Be like the steel rod in water. And it doesn't dissolve, doesn't get affected. Subhanallah. We ask Allah Ta'ala to make us as perfect Muslims. And to make our final words, La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. If there are no questions, we'll conclude. طيب نهلل لا إله إلا الله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم ربي لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات بارك الله فيكم السلام عليكم